All right, looks like we're live. And this isn't a typical live stream. This is actually, pardon me, this is a little bit of work for Asshole Consulting. I'm just doing this as a live stream because that's the best way to do that. Doing a video is a pain in the ass. Especially since I don't have any good video software on my laptop right now. All right, so if, by the way, folks, you should check out assholeconsulting.com if you want to catch some good advice from Aaron Clarey or the people Aaron Clarey may farm it out to. And he farmed this one out to me. So let's get to the question here. Hi, Aaron. Big fan of your work. Could I please get a video response to your thoughts on why single men are leaving the church and why the churches shame single men into conformity? Man up, get married, messages, etc. Some sample articles below. Can churches do anything to stop single men from leaving? I would be happy to pay extra since it's outside your normal deal. Okay, well, Aaron farmed this out to me, and the questionnaire or whatever, he agreed to that. So that's what we're going to discuss here. First, he links a couple of articles here. He has one from the gospelcoalition.org. The article is entitled "Dude, Where's Your Bride?" by Kevin DeYoung, and the second article is "Where Are All the Christian Single Men?" by Adam McLean on adammclean.com. So if you want to Google these articles, I didn't put them in. I didn't put them in the description because I always forget to do that. Plus, they're really not worth your time, if I'm being honest with you. Dude, Where's Your Bride is somewhat even-handed. Where Are All the Christian Men is decidedly not. But they are good examples. So we have a crisis of marriage in this country in the West, but I'll just focus on America because that's what I know. I'm American to the core. And there's a number of reasons for it, obviously. And I don't think I need to tell anyone who's a fan of Aaron Clarey the various myriad of reasons for it. Economic, the family court scaring, the just the nature of marriage these days. I mean, MGTOW didn't come out of nowhere. However much MGTOW may have lost the plot after a while, MGTOW didn't come out of nowhere. And they certainly had a point when they first showed up. And I don't think I need to reiterate any of that to you. So the answer to the questions here are twofold. Why churches shame single men into conformity? And what can the churches do to reverse this, to win back single men? And they have lost single men, by the way. They've lost them by a wide margin. Single Christian men, church is not it's not a particularly hospitable place to them. To some extent, singles in general, but especially men. The church is obviously very family-oriented for good reason, but that can go too far, and sometimes they fail single people in general. In fact, I know that old cat lady, Gina Dalfonza, who used to, maybe she still is, but I don't think she still is. She used to be the editor at breakpoint.org, one of these Christian sites. She had a book recently come out on how the churches failed single people. And I mean, she would know. I think she's like a 50-year-old cat lady or something like that. So let's step back and be fair. It's not particularly good to single people in general. But it is especially true. It is especially harsh to single men, and that's because in the church, particularly the conservative Protestant church, which it sounds like that's where you're coming from. I could be wrong on that, but especially that's what I know. The men are always at fault, even when they're not. If you've ever watched that movie Fireproof, and I don't suggest you watch it because it's a terrible movie, but that's basically the message of it. The men are always at fault, even when they're not. The women are always the poor put upon victims. The men are always the perpetrators. The men are always at fault, even when they're not. I remember a Christian article years ago from one of these sites where they were talking about the phenomenon of older men going down to spring break to, older men with money, hoping to get some lovely young ladies on their arm. And them talking about how these men are predators taking advantage of these poor girls. Because, the girls didn't know what they were doing. They weren't using the man for his money just as surely as he was using her for something else. And that's the mindset. The men are always at fault, even when they're not. In fact, they're in the one article here, Where Have All the Christian Men? This guy goes on and on and on, and a lot of it's trite, but there's a section in here where he goes, seriously, where do all the guys go when they hit 20? Put down the Xbox controller. And right away, I'm like, oh, here we go. I'd be willing to bet you Adam McLean is a boomer. I'd be willing to put some money down on it. I don't know anything about him. I'd never heard of him until I was linked to this article. I'm going to guess boomer, because if there's one thing boomers hate, it's video games. And he's all, so he goes off on here about, you shouldn't be playing video games. You should be out getting a wife. How dare you have a hobby? And look, some of you guys do need to chill out with the video games out there. Don't get me wrong. All things in moderation. But yeah, let's just demonize a hobby. And you don't see women's hobbies and interests demonized in the church, do you? So again, it's the sentiment of why the men are always at fault even when they're not. As for why that is, there's a number of factors. Number one, the church, as with the world at large right now, is run by boomers. And boomers worship women. Worship them. Go, if you got the satellite radio in your car like I do, and it's quite nice if you can afford it. I was lucky I got a year free of it. But go to the 60s station or on the iHeartRadio or whatever. If there's an oldie station in your area that still plays 60s music, check this out. Check them out. And listen to, obviously some of it's good, but you're going to hear a lot of whiny little betas and pussy pedestal. Frankie Valli, I think, is the one where, oh, man, did that guy need to sprout a sack. That was the mother's milk that boomers were raised on. They worshipped women. So when you have churches run by boomers now, women can do no wrong. Some slut, with three kids to 8 different fathers comes in, and I didn't misspoke there. I was actually making a joke. But yeah, some slut comes in with a whole bunch of bastards in tow, and she's found Jesus now, and that's all well and good. Well, they roll out the red carpet for her, to staggering amounts, because not because she's a repentant sinner, but because she's a victim. Oh, she was a delicate flower who had been done wrong by scores and scores of terrible men. And that's the mentality of the church. There's another reason for it, though, and it's a little less obvious until you've really kind of looked at church culture in this country. What are the things that move church culture in this country? Well, Christian radio, Christian para-ministry organizations, I guess, for lack of a better term. Things like Focus on the Family, Harvest Bible, these parachurch, mega church networks and things like that. They're what move Christian culture in our country, for better and worse. And they're geared towards women primarily because their audience is women primarily, because they're the Christian version of daytime TV. They're the Christian version of Dr. Phil and Oprah. You know, James Dobson is the Christian version of Oprah. And his audience is probably has a bit of an overlap, but is a bunch of Christian moms and Christian single women and primarily female. And that those parachurch ministries, I mean, think of how many pastors get, I mean, not necessarily marching orders, but get lesson plans and other helpful material to try and do their job from these very organizations. So that's a factor in it right there. And it's not one people talk about. Obviously, the church is run by boomers right now, and boomers worship women. Um, Women are the primary audience for a lot of the para church ministry media that's put out there, and that affects it. Inevitably, people will begin catering to their audience. You know, to some extent, you may or may not sell out, but to some extent, you end up speaking to your audience. If you at all want to be successful at whatever sort of media endeavor you're working on. So that's part of it right there. Can churches do anything to stop single men from leaving? Now, here's the $1,000,000 question. Obviously, can they? Oh, absolutely. They could just, sprout a sack and stop acting like this. Call women out on their BS as much as they call men out. Call women out on, okay, yeah, maybe some of the single guys are wasting too much time playing video games. Okay, sure, fair enough. Maybe some of the single women are wasting too much time on social media and getting their attention fixed then, and they don't seriously pursue men or allow themselves to be pursued by men. Dating women in their 20s, they're incredibly flighty, to put it politely. They flake out on you. They ignore you. I was pursuing a girl around that age a couple years ago, and reached a point where she didn't seem interested, and then I come to find out she kind of was, but I was just apparently supposed to be more aggressive about it. And anybody got time for some of that shit sometimes. Like at a certain point, you blow off plans with me enough times, I'm going to move on. Women don't invest in relationships as much as they used to because in some ways, in much the same way, a lot of single men can get a sort of sexual fix, not obviously as good as a real sexual relationship with an actual loving partner, but they can scratch that itch somewhat with porn. In the same way, women can scratch that attention itch with social media. That's not something being addressed by the church. Addressing that by the church would do a world of good. Because like video games, social media is not an inherently bad thing, but it can certainly easily be abused. Basically, just men don't mind being challenged. Men enjoy it, actually. Men enjoy somebody saying to man up and marry, or just saying to man up. Men want to hear that. Men want to be told that. That's not the issue. What upsets so many men, what I imagine upsets you, is you don't like a moving goalpost. You don't like being told, everything's your fault even when it isn't. You don't like being told to man up when you're already manned up. You don't like the slander of it. It's one thing to be challenged. It's another thing to be slandered. So, I mean, you paid for a video, so I don't want to make this too long. My streams usually go for like an hour. Uh, and I don't think you want to waste an hour listening to this, although I might go on for a little longer. But there's twofold reasons that the church has been so feminized. I mean, obviously, there's so much feminism in the broader culture. A little bit of it can't help but seep into the church, but more than that, the churches are run by boomers. Boomers absolutely worship the pussy. And also just the nature of how broader Christian media is structured in this country, it's gonna have a largely female audience. So those are your reasons why. As for what a church can do, first of all, you know what? I just thought of another angle. There's a lot of guys running the church who are just effeminate weasels. There's a lot of pastors out there who are just effeminate weasels. And again, this is speaking for conservative Protestants. I don't know what goes on in the Orthodox Church entirely. I know, according to some surveys, half of all Catholic priests are homos. So that's a whole different that's a whole different can of worms right there. But to some extent, I think maybe a good look needs to be taken at how seminaries are structured. Who goes to these Bible colleges to be a pastor? Well, usually the good little boy who got straight A's his whole life because he always did what mommy told him. And you go into all this debt for a job that doesn't pay well unless you're crooked. There needs to maybe be more men in the church, in church leadership. Men who have worked construction or served in the military. I almost use Trump as a litmus test. If Donald Trump's manner of speaking makes you clutch your pearls, you probably shouldn't be in charge of the church. Maybe you should be teaching Sunday school with all the other women. But there's a lot of effeminate weasels at the pulpit, and that I don't know how to fix. I think maybe if you can just get some men actually in charge of the church. In all fairness, if somebody makes it a long time as a pastor, that gig does tend to harden. As my favorite preacher Steve Brown said, as a pastor, he buried more babies and mopped up more suicides than you can possibly imagine. It's not the easiest job in the world. But young pastors are often insufferable. And how to fix that, I don't know. Maybe if you just get some real men in charge, and maybe just look for pastors within the church, have mentor programs, and maybe much like secular college, maybe the seminary needs to be evacuated for a bit until it's cleaned up. So, I mean, beyond that, churches can just hold women accountable. I think that's the big thing. I don't think you, and I don't think any other Christian man has a problem with being held accountable. You just don't want to be the only one held accountable. Somebody in the chat says The Pastor from The Patriot is what we need. Yes, that's a fantastic movie, and that's exactly what we need. We need more of that. So yeah, that's the best I can answer your question there. The why is there's a lot of reasons for that. As for what churches can do, the things churches can do are kind of obvious. hold women accountable as well as men. Get some men behind the pulpit who have actually had some dirt under their fingernails a few times in their life. And, stop shaming men for being men. Don't expect men to be emotional women. Don't expect them to be soft and mild and tender. And don't shame a man for having a hobby. If a man works hard and he's paying his bills and he's being a productive member of society, you leave him alone when he wants to wind down. So yeah, those are the best advice I can give you on that. I will say though that it's not all bad. If you just really look at your local church level, and I don't know where exactly you live, so I'm blessed to live in a relatively red area of a freshly red state here in Pennsylvania. But look around. There are good churches out there. You got to look. I find the smaller, more unaffiliated ones generally are the best, particularly in this area. And you gotta have get involved with some sort of small group or something like that. Get yourself some good Christian male friends, real men. That makes a world of difference. You can weather a lot of BS from the church at large when you're shored up like that. So that's all I got. Like I said, I don't want to ramble on. I don't want to have this go on as long as a normal stream or anything. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered your questions. And folks, if you want to get some advice, you can check out assholeconsulting.com. Also, if you enjoy the content I produce, you can check out the Patreon down below where you can become a regular supporter. Check out the PayPal. You can become a, send a one-time donation. There's even Amazon wish list down there. And I want to thank you all for listening. And thank you to the person that asked the question. I hope this helped out some. And that's all I got for tonight, folks. Beckloff out.